This is the Etiology podcast. I am your host, Elka Kubaku, licensed social worker and psychotherapist. In this podcast, we explore divisive issues around food, health, and body image with the goal of mending relationships within the eating disorder recovery professional community and creating a space where a multiplicity of perspectives can coexist harmoniously. This podcast is uncensored and encompasses the political and ideological spectrum. If you believe something you hear is harmful or misinformed, please be respectful to the speaker. And also, feel free to reach out about recording another episode on the same topic from your vantage point. My hope is that if, as professionals, we can hold each other's stories with respect and compassion, we'll be better able to do so for our clients. Traditional medical and dietetic rhetoric around the relationship between food, weight, and health emphasizes correlations between particular BMI ranges and medical conditions. However, it often fails to consider how these correlations are interpreted and how these interpretations subsequently impact both individual patients and society at large. In this episode, Laura Cohen shares her personal journey as a former registered dietitian trained in a weight-centric environment and a parent of a loved one with an eating disorder who was harmed by many of the messages she was taught would promote health and well-being. Laura serves as a lead family mentor with Equip, which provides evidence-based care for eating disorders, and is on the board of directors of Feast, an organization that supports family of people affected by eating disorders. Laura is also an eating disorder recovery coach and shares insights on her website, No Way Way, which I will link in the show notes.
Hi, Laura. Thanks so much for joining me today.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah. So you are in an interesting position. You started out as a registered dietitian. How many years ago was that you did your
Do I
training?
have to say how old I am? I'm just kidding.
Oh.
I became a registered dietitian. It would have been the fall of 93.
Fall of 93.
Long
Okay.
time ago. Yeah, I
Right
got my
before
master's. I got my master's in 95.
okay. Wow. So you've been like in food related spaces for a long
A
time.
long time. Yes, yes.
Cool. And now you're supporting families of people with eating disorders. Is that?
Correct. Yes, yes. Nothing technically to do with what my degree was, although obviously
Mhm.
I can always I use my degree every day and, things
Yeah.
that I've learned along the way. But yes, my position now is from lived experience of helping my own teenage daughter through her treatment into a strong recovery from her eating disorder. So I help other families going through the same process.
Awesome. Cool. Can you start by just telling our listeners a little bit about what were their perspectives around food, health, weight, and the relationship between them when you were doing your training back in 93 and how you've shifted from those since then? What's changed since then?
Gosh, I can't believe how long ago it was. And I don't know the ages of what our listeners will be. Some of them may not have been born yet, and I'm just kidding. But back in
Well,
the day,
yeah, your first listener right here was not born yet then.
nice. Oh my
That's a year
good.
before I was born, so now I'm giving my age too. Not that it's a secret.
Um, so yeah, I mean, it was very, very different. I mean, when I got interested into nutrition, just to back it up even a little bit more, just to paint the full picture, was when I was about 15, turning 16, grew up in Miami, Florida, bodies everywhere, bodies, went to the beach all year long, and I started to not like my body. And of course, when I started to not like my body in 1980, I don't know how many, 80, God, it would have been if I 89, it would have been mid 80s, early to mid 80s. Um, my mom did what she thought was right, and it was, well, I'm going to send you to a nutritionist. Now, mind you, my body was, all bodies are fine, but we're talking like I may have wanted to lose very few pounds. Um,
Mhm.
so I went to a dietitian And I thought it was really cool. I loved to talk about food and nutrition. And did I ever love my body from what we did? No. But she put me on a restrictive eating plan at the
Wow.
age of 15 for someone who literally walked in her office to lose probably 5 pounds and just to make her stomach look better like everybody else. Or like everyone else wanted because we were just in bathing suits, but whatever.
Hmm.
So that's how I got really intrigued about the field of nutrition because I thought it was really cool what she was doing.
Yep.
So went to school for it, I was one of those people that walked into undergraduate knowing what I wanted to do. And everything from that year on was nutrition. And you have to remember, what you're asking me was I was educated between the years of 1989 and then we're going to give it 1995 by the time I finished my master's, 1994, 95. I was thick in the world of fat free.
Hmm.
Everything was fat free. Everything was about heart healthy. Fat was your enemy. Carbs were awesome. Like back then, carbs were awesome.
Hmm.
You can see how the tides have switched. So
Wow.
everything I ever learned at school all had to do with you need to lose weight. You need to lose weight to be in a healthy body. And throughout my whole, next 25 years-ish plus or so after that, that's what was ingrained in me from everything
Hmm.
I ever learned was weight loss. You need to lose weight or if a healthier body is a smaller body. Although I did claim that I didn't believe in diets back, in the past, 15 years.
Hmm. Okay, there's so much here.
So
So
much.
when you go into your initial nutritionist and get on your first restrictive dieting, how did that work for you?
What do you mean? It sucked.
It sucked. Did you achieve your goal? Did you feel good about it? Did you hate it?
Oh, oh, it was the first time I was ever introduced to exchanges.
Hmm.
So I was put on an exchange diet, however many proteins I could eat a day and carbs and da da da. And I remember writing down everything I ate and talking about it. I mean, I thought it was awesome at the time, but no, it taught me how to go on a diet.
Hmm.
It had nothing to do with my health. There was no
Yeah.
discussions about health in that office.
Yeah. It taught you how to go on a diet.
That's
So
what I asked for. Yeah.
at the time, you felt good about that.
I was hoping that I would love my body after that and that I would have what society deemed as a hot body for a 16-year-old in Miami.
Hmm. Did it work?
No.
Okay. Um, did it change your body and you still didn't feel happy or it wasn't successful even at that?
Oh, I didn't. I, I was a. It was ridiculous. It was ridiculous that it was even a discussion that I would go to a dietitian to lose weight to feel better about my body.
Hmm.
Especially given that I have, I have a straight size, small, privileged body. Um,
Hmm.
and all it did was say that that wasn't okay either.
Yeah. So it reinforced what you already believed about
Oh,
your body.
100%. Yeah, they're sending me someone paying a woman to put me on a diet to change my body. Well, obviously something's wrong with my body.
Right. Wow. And then you go to school, and what that tells me when you're describing it was fat-free time, carbs were considered good. It also to me shows the transience of some of what we believe about the relationship between food and health.
Yes. Yeah.
And when it was presented to you, I imagine it was presented as like this is the scientific fact or truth, right?
Oh, 100%. Yeah. I mean, I went to Syracuse University and New York University. Like I didn't go, like I went to, nice institutions. And of course they're going to teach me the right things. Why would I question any of that? We don't
Mhm.
question things back in the 80s. I think we were just taught and you believed them.
Yeah.
I mean,
And then
my father's in the medical field. Like I had complete faith in science and
yeah,
what I was learning.
wow. And the science then was go fat free and lose weight.
Totally. Totally. 100%. Yeah.
And then you became a registered dietitian. For how long were you actually working in that field before you stepped out of it?
It wasn't that many years. I mean, I always, have worked in the health field. I worked for a couple years as a dietitian. I actually went back to culinary school in the middle of all of that. Um,
Uh-huh.
so worked in the culinary field. Then I went back and worked a couple years at Mass General Hospital as a dietitian. I kind of went back and forth between cooking and being an RD, kind of putting them together.
Oh, that's an interesting combination.
Yeah, I thought so at the time.
Yeah. Um, well, when you were working as a registered dietitian, what population were you working with?
So mainly like general nutrition, but I bounced into a couple specialties. And mind you, this was back in 97-ish, 99. Gosh, I'm old. Um, and was hired actually as a bilingual dietitian, but it was general health. And then I did some prenatal work. Then for a year or so, I did HIV and
Mhm.
cancer
Wow.
oncology. Um, and but a lot of just general nutrition too.
Yeah. How do you look back at that time now and the work you did then?
My favorite part about that job, I will always say, was working with my oncology patients
Hmm.
because they had a problem, a short-term problem that I was helping them through. Other
Yeah.
than that, yeah, I'm putting people on diets. They're not losing weight because we know that that doesn't really work. And it was like a merry-go-round, but at least my oncology patients, they wanted to be there. They showed up. They
Yeah.
had a problem. I was able to help them with solutions.
Yeah. So with medical nutrition, even looking back, it felt like what you had was more on target. You were able to help people
With that particular thing.
particular.
But
Yeah.
for diabetes, yeah, you're kind of explaining to them how to use their insulin with their food. So that
Yeah.
kind of stuff, yes.
Mhm.
Um, even HIV, because they were losing, they were so cachectic, they were losing weight so fast. Uh,
Yeah.
but anything that I was doing weight loss wise, my cardiac, I think it was when I was an intern actually, and a patient had like just had a heart attack, and I was on the floor, and I went in to do probably whatever nutrition thing I had to do, and I remember the cardiologist mocking me as a dietitian, like, "Oh,
Oh,
she's gonna come in and tell you not to eat a steak," and I was like, "Okay, so you just completely invalidated anything that I could say to this patient."
oh no.
Yeah. Yep.
Wow. Tell me about, okay, then you let your RD license lapse when you had kids.
Yeah.
Your daughter develops an eating disorder, and you switch all the way to the other side, very much to the health at every size, anti-diet. Can you share that story?
Sure. So in between all of that time, I actually did stay in the wellness field. Um, I won't go into a full detail, but I was aligned with a health and wellness company that
Mhm.
believed in, people having the healthiest body and selling products around it. And I believed it because there were studies and all those things. So that was a lot of my kids growing up that I very much touted the word health and being
Mhm.
healthy. Um, with that being said, I also was very body positive that
Mhm.
I never, I wasn't the mom that wouldn't put quote unquote unhealthy food in the house. Like we had everything in the house. That word moderation, which now I've grown to hate. But
Oh.
that was a word, that I really lived by. Like, yeah, you can have anything you want.
Mhm.
That was kind of my years in between. So I was like kind of nutrition adjacent. They
Yeah.
loved I was a dietitian. I had my master's because I was utilized for
Mhm.
that. Like, oh, Laura Cohen, she's a dietitian. Listen to her. So going through all of that, and then my daughter at the age of 16 gets diagnosed with an eating disorder right in
Mhm.
front of my eyes. And that was obviously really, really painful. And even
Mhm.
when she was diagnosed, I didn't quite understand. I didn't understand a lot. Um,
Mhm.
and I remember finally jumping into the parent community. And this one mom in particular, who's a dear friend of mine now, 5 years later, we actually are colleagues and work at the same company, had said to me, because I was like, oh, I'm a dietitian, I got this. Like, whatever I got this, I got this, I understand nutrition. And I remember this friend said to me, who was not a friend at the time, everything you know about nutrition, you're going to have to forget in order to save your daughter's life. And I
Wow.
still was like, yeah, whatever. She's like, put your effing armor on, and
Wow.
that's how you're going to save your daughter's life. And I walked around that summer still being like, I can do this, like da da da. And then little by little, as I started to really learn much more about, I'd never heard of health at every size.
Mhm.
Let that sink in. This was 6 years ago. 5, 6 years ago. I may have heard of it, but didn't really understand it. Definitely didn't know there was any science behind it. And
Mhm.
I still tried to stand on my pedestal of health. And then
Mhm.
slowly, as I learned more and educated myself and really learned about health at every size, I totally painfully did that shift that I am so glad that I did.
Mhm. Wow.
I'm gonna
There
this,
was
well, no, the readers can't see us, but this is what changed my life.
Anti-Diet
Anti-Diet by Christy Harrison.
by
Um,
Chrissy.
I read that book sitting in the chair right behind me, and it was the first book that the reason I really, really liked it, A, she was a dietitian, and she has a
Mhm.
master's in public health, and she was a journalist. And the book has a lot of history in it. And as I was reading the history of like how diet culture came about and all of that, it very much was the same timeline as my education.
Mhm.
She even quoted in there, the director of my program, Marion Nestle at NYU. There's like a bunch of stuff about her. And I was like, oh my gosh, these were like my professors. So
Mhm.
it really, it, it really showed how I was educated back then and how things were
Mhm.
back then, and then how it went, in time to where we are now.
She revisited your story and also reframed it or put it in the context of a story moving towards something else.
Totally.
Wow, there was a powerful moment when you were talking. I found myself tearing up a little bit, but when you're talking about you find out your daughter has an eating disorder, and not only like just having a child who's that ill has got to be terrifying and so painful. And alongside that, there's almost a shattering of so much of what you stood for and believed in and had studied and were working toward. What was that like for you? What were you feeling at the time?
Horrible. The only way, well, there's a lot of ways I can explain it, but one way that I can explain it is that I was embarrassed. I
Mhm.
felt like I had egg on my face.
Mhm.
I still would love to reach out to hundreds of people that I ever helped.
Wow.
Um, I publicly, because I was pretty public on Facebook just my last career, and I had to show up and go back on things that I had said for years. Uh,
Mhm. Wow.
lost colleagues and friends in the process. Um, most of them I'm friends with now, again, after some pain, but not all. And but I wasn't gonna stand down to
Mhm.
my shift just because it didn't fit with someone else's agenda.
Mhm. Wow.
It was awful.
That's got to be so terrifying and also so brave to state publicly, like, disregard everything I've shared until now
And everything I did.
and everything I did. Wow.
There were times even during my daughter's when she was in treatment, this another parent was on Facebook. We were must have been like in a Facebook group, and we actually our kids were in treatment together. And I must have she was a very fat phobic mom.
Mhm.
She would say horrible things about her child. It was really hard. Um, and I challenged her with something, right, but not in a bad way. Like I was actually trying to help her. And I'll never forget that she like publicly was like, I know what you used to do and quoted the company that I worked for and how dare you and you're such a hypocrite. And I was like, I'm not like, yeah, I did do that and I don't do that anymore, right? So
Mm.
it doesn't go away. I remember I tried to volunteer for an organization and I had a meeting with the executive director. I was
Mhm.
volunteering with an eating disorder organization. I met with the executive director and she's like, "Yeah, I looked up your Instagram and I don't think you're a fit for us."
Wow. So that's another challenge of coming from where you're coming from and making such a drastic shift is that it's really hard to find a home base or a place where you belong because like you don't align with what you believed in the past.
Yep.
So you don't fit in with that group. And alongside that, the eating disorder recovery field is suspicious of you because of what your role used to be.
Yep. Yep. At that time, very much so.
You feel like that shifted at this point
Well,
in
I
your
mean,
life.
I think, it's been 5 years and I've definitely, people who I know now, they don't know me from my past.
Hmm.
I've been in the field enough to,
Yeah.
have that change. With that being said,
Hmm.
it's still really challenging.
Yeah.
I don't like
You've
to
in,
tell people what I used to do.
yeah, you've in some ways built an alternative identity.
Yeah.
But the old story is almost it feels like you're I don't know, very actively shutting it out, but like there's when you tell your story now, it's where you're at currently. And the past is sort of like, let's keep that as far past as we can.
Yeah, except I do believe that my past is a huge part of my story and I'll always talk about it. I
Yeah.
mean, I could have avoided that in the whole conversation. So no, I think my past is my story.
Yeah.
And if someone now in the place where I am now, I always make it part of my story. Like when I'm
Mhm.
speaking with families, especially when I'm speaking with caregivers who are adjacent to what, areas I used to be, I am very much telling them what my story was and how I overcame it and how I had to get educated. It wasn't just emotions. I needed to be
Yeah.
educated. I needed
Mhm.
to understand it. Um,
Yeah.
so no, my story is my story.
Yeah. Cool. So it's not just a source of shame at this point. It's also something that allows you to connect to people who are
Oh,
coming from where you were.
every day.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just worked with a mom, a mom yesterday. Oh, my voice just went out. I
Mhm.
just worked with a patient yesterday who's a physician. Um, she actually is a college age. I mean, she works with college kids, and her daughter is in college and was just diagnosed with an eating disorder. So it was funny because she came to the session talking about that, and she's like, "I just want to tell you my background," and I go, "That's
Oh,
okay. Let me tell you my background." And it was like that moment of like, yeah, we both still had kids who wound up with eating disorders, even though that's what she does, what I did, but yeah.
yeah. You can hold that process of somebody like reshaping and rediscovering their identity. And also you have a kind of credibility with them where it's like you understand me, you get me.
Yeah. Yeah. One of
Wow,
the biggest things I have to work with families is diet culture.
for sure. Yeah. What was when you had started moving to the health at every size, you got a lot of pushback from your past dietitian wellness community.
Yeah.
What was that like?
Painful.
Mhm.
And I would start questioning it. Um, I even remember one conversation in particular, it had to do with my daughter's treatment, but when I learned about family-based treatment, which is a modality for eating disorders, for
Yeah.
people who don't know, and I was learning about how to feed your loved one as many calories as you can get in, the heavy whipping cream, the butter, all the foods, like all the things. And I remember talking to a friend of mine who was a fellow dietitian, and she said to me, now mind you, my daughter's in recovery for anorexia.
Yeah.
And this friend meant no harm, but she
Hmm.
said to me, so what I'm having trouble understanding is that, yeah, well, you may get your daughter better from her eating disorder, but you're also starting a whole other problem. And I was like, oh, my dog's barking. I was like, whoa. And of course, then there's like the insecurity in me, right?
Hmm.
Am I doing something wrong? And her beliefs, even to this day, are very health aligned and fat phobic.
Hmm. Wow.
So yeah, it was hard. There was another dietitian.
Yeah. And you said at the time you had pulled away from or were pushed away from some of those relationships and have started to bridge some of them. Can you describe that process, what it was like in the beginning, in terms of relationships with people from the health and wellness community and how that's evolved or hasn't evolved over time?
Most of them have evolved, some have not. I think that I think it's like this with anything, and we live in such a society right now that's so polarized, right? And you've got your people who can not only agree to disagree, but are able to have a
Hmm.
discussion about it
Yep.
and move forward. And even sometimes you may not agree.
Hmm.
Other people do not want to move forward. Um, I was a threat to some business because I was a leader who came in and totally said, I don't believe in this line of thinking anymore.
Hmm.
So, people are people and they have their emotions. So I think the
Can you
people that
give
I was
some?
able to move forward with were ones that even in a climate like we live in right now, we can
Mhm.
disagree with things and there's still maybe that little sticky point in a relationship,
Yep.
but you're still able to see other things. And not everyone can do that. So I actually think it's kind of parallel to where we are right now in the world.
Yeah, that feels very true. Can you give some texture to I forget exactly the phrase you used, but the people who were upset at you taking this new public stance, and afraid of how it would impact them? What did that look like? Or can you give some examples of what kind of feedback, if you can call it that, you were getting from people?
Um, I think there was money involved at the end of the day.
Yeah.
There always is, right? When things get really heated and emotional. Um, and people really respected me for my voice and my views, but when my views didn't align anymore with others, it was I can imagine that it felt very threatening.
Hmm.
Um, and I can have a loud voice, like I'm not gonna lie. And I think probably during those times, and it was so different, the things
Hmm.
that I was talking about, and I think people felt threatened, and I think that there was a piece of my own guilt and my own, everything that I had put out there. I was like, well, I need to really, if I'm gonna do this, I gotta put
Hmm.
my feet down. And I know a lot of dietitians or people in the health profession at that time. I remember hearing this term, and it totally resonated with me, was straddling the fence. I was
Hmm.
straddling the fence. Like I had blisters up my tuchus, like I had one leg in health and wellness and the other leg was like, no. Like I'm anti-diet, I'm health at every size. And I didn't straddle for very long. I
Hmm.
took a jump over. And that's my personality.
Yeah. You took a jump over. You were very vocal about it, both because you're a vocal person, and if you're taking a stand, it's going to be loud and clear.
Mhm.
And also, tell me if this feels true. There was a part of you that was feeling very guilty for what you had done before and
Oh yeah,
trying to correct that.
100%. Yes. Yeah. Um,
Mhm.
I felt guilty. And I also know in my heart that I did what I thought was right.
Yeah.
In any of those years, I I was always very strong in saying I don't talk about things I don't believe in. So all
Yeah.
those years, I believed in what I was doing. Um,
Hmm.
I was fed information. I believed what I was doing. It was what I was educated in professionally. So I don't think I sat there like as a puppet of somebody and, I
Hmm.
didn't believe it, but I was doing something. So no, no, no. I firmly believed in
Hmm.
what I was doing and what my stance was. Um,
Hmm.
and was, I'm using your words, brave enough. I don't like to give myself credit. Brave enough to take a step back and be like, maybe I wasn't right.
Yeah.
Maybe I wasn't right. And start to be educated in different things.
Hmm. Yeah. There was a kind of integrity in your position, even though you don't at this point in time align with what it led you to.
Oh, totally. Yes. Yep. I just wish I could go back to all those people. Although most people I think no. But
Mhm.
yes. But even
Yeah.
I can go back as being, in my 20s as a dietitian at Mass General, right? It was no
Hmm.
different.
Hmm.
The things that I was told to teach, patients. I
Yeah.
don't believe in that anymore.
Yeah. You feel a regret for some of the people you work with and alongside that you also like connect with your intention back then. Like you feel the integrity of your position based on where you were coming from. So there's some self-understanding
Yeah.
and also some meaning in the way you've used that to connect to other parents who are where you once were.
Yeah. Yes. And I
Can
say the same thing. We only do what we do what we know best, right?
Yeah, that feels like an important message to people also like who are recovering from eating disorders or are starting to shift body image where sometimes the shame can jump the other way. Like from first it's like I feel ashamed of my body because like I was told it was wrong. And then it shifts to like I feel ashamed for being ashamed for feeling ashamed of my body because I'm like, hey, I'm not supposed to care about that.
Yeah. It's just shame. Shame is just such a horrible emotion, right?
Yeah, that's a painful one for sure.
And it's not a useful one.
Yeah, yeah, this is true. Yeah. Can you, to the extent that you feel comfortable, tell me the story or a story of someone who you initially had a hard time connecting with as you made the shift and have since bridged that gap? Because you mentioned there were some people like that.
Um, some of it I don't want to name complete situations. Uh,
Right.
but it was
Or like if you mix a few stories together so you're not
yeah.
making a decision.
I mean, there were people that there's no one I don't think that completely jumped over and saw my point of view.
Hmm.
There was people that just accepted me because they love me for who I am,
Hmm.
and that we would just not we would agree to disagree.
Yeah.
There have been, people that are inconsequential. I don't like say someone's
Hmm.
inconsequential, but that's probably
Yeah.
a strong term. But people who I don't have deep relationship. I mean, tons
Hmm.
of people, tens of hundreds of people, not hundreds, but oh my
Hmm.
God, I couldn't even come up with how many people over the past 5 years who thanked me
Hmm.
for my change.
Yeah.
Might not have done it publicly, but the DMs were, I had a strong DM game.
So DMs from people who were afraid of announcing it publicly. I take it those were people outside of the eating disorder recovery
Oh, I'm not
community.
even talking about eating disorder recovery.
Yeah.
I'm talking about the shift when I went, from, you know, healthy eating and wellness and whatever word you want to co-opt into that
Yeah.
to health at every size and anti-diet.
Mhm.
Oh, I have so many people that have reached out and thanked me for that.
Yeah. It feels like that's a pretty common response when somebody is very vocal about something that feels controversial. So you have like sort of the loudest voices are like telling you you're wrong or pushing you away because of it. And then you have all the people who maybe believe they're alone and are afraid to speak out, private messaging you that like we're so grateful you've taken this stance. This is what we want to be saying out loud but can't.
Yep. Yes. And thank you so much because it's helped them.
Mm,
Um, so yeah.
yeah. What I hear you saying also in terms of the relationships that lasted, like there were people who were, like you described it, just in it for money or maybe just business relationships that you've moved away from and maybe don't miss in your life so much at this point in time. Though it was probably painful to hear what they were saying at the
Yeah.
moment,
Or not saying, but yes.
saying or not saying.
Right, but yes. Yes, life goes on, right? Like it's all you always want to think you matter more than we can just turn the page, right?
Yeah. And then there were also people who you had more of a relationship with. And in the beginning, it was difficult to navigate that.
Yes.
with your new views, and there was some conflict or distance at that point in time.
Yeah.
And then as something shifted along the lines that allowed you to come back together, even while having different positions, but where the relationship was able to carry those different positions
With most people, yes.
with most people. And would you describe, like, if you were to name the shift that allowed that to happen, allowed you to move from conflict and distance to being in a relationship while still disagreeing, what was it that shifted either for you or for them that allowed that to happen?
I was always willing to engage in any relationship. I never had a problem. I never distanced myself from anybody.
Yeah.
So that was not on me. I was hurt because I couldn't
Yeah.
believe how people weren't that way. Um,
Mhm.
what allowed some people to come back after time, I think it was time. I think it was starting to respect me as a human again, as a person again, and
Yeah.
letting some of the other crap settle.
Mhm.
Um, and missing a relationship.
Yeah.
Used to be there and being like, ooh, still
Mhm.
owning that they don't disagree with why we were upset with me, but saying that, you
Mhm.
know, life happens and you're still an important person to me. Not everybody, but some people did come back.
The relationship became more important than the position or the
Yep,
fear of your position.
yep, yep, yeah.
Yeah. That's a powerful movement. And I feel like that's what I want to achieve with this, like with having these conversations. It's just like being able to have a relationship with each other, which is more difficult with strangers, but that can withstand differences.
Yeah, and it's hard. Like, I mean, it still happens all the time, and the dialectical of most of the world has these beliefs about health, nutrition, bodies, all of that. And I so firmly am the other camp. I was,
Mhm.
the other day, I was volunteering. I belong to a temple. I just joined.
Yeah.
And, just meeting people for the first time. We were actually
Mhm.
volunteering, cooking some meals for some populations. And these people, they're so nice. But, we're trying to relate to each other. And I had said something, oh, I was a dietitian and now I work in eating disorder. And it was like multiple people, the conversations with me had to do with, oh yeah, I've got an eating disorder. I can't stop eating. And I'm just like, and
Mhm.
I've learned from years, I used to just go back at that and try to engage in that. Or, this one's telling me they don't eat sugar and this one's telling me this and that. And I'm literally like cringing inside. And so many years have gone by that I'm just like, just stay in your place right now, Laura. Like just don't engage, da da. So it's hard. It's
Yeah.
hard.
Do you still have that reaction internally, but you're able to talk yourself down from it?
Especially the one that said, why my eating disorders, I can't stop eating. And I'm looking at him like, I, I know you're trying to be funny, but so not funny.
Like, and when you know someone who, especially somebody who's close to you, like a
I
child,
would not have let
oh,
that go with someone
like,
close.
and it also it feels so painful because you're like, no, like I know what an eating disorder is.
Yeah. Yeah. If I
Like,
had known the person, I would have made a comment.
yeah, it's not a word that can be joked about anymore once you've seen it, like in its full gory detail.
Yeah. 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 And it was interesting. And then one of the other women was telling me that, her partner is in obesity medicine. So I'm sitting here going, I don't want to have this conversation. I don't want to have this conversation. We started it a little bit and I was just like, it's Sunday. Yeah. I don't want to have it. So
Mhm.
it's hard to get away from it. It's everywhere.
It's
And I
everywhere.
think
Sure.
for our own mental health and well-being, there's so much disconnect in the world right now and arguments over
Mhm.
everything that there's sometimes I'm just like, I can't. I just can't.
Mhm. Like, even as somebody who wants to talk to everybody, there's a time when like the emotional work involved just feels like it's not worth it in the
I
moment.
started a little bit and then I was like, all right, I'm just gonna cut the parsley. Like I'm good. I'm just gonna sit here and cut parsley.
Yeah, it's a pretty innocuous activity.
Yeah.
Is it
But that took a lot of
okay?
work. That took a lot of work.
You were like consciously, there was a part of you that you were consciously like talking down, like
And
it's
a
okay
couple
to feel
years
that
ago,
way.
I wouldn't have been able to keep like to been able to just not go down those avenues. Like I would have had to have proved.
Oh, what would that conversation have looked like if you were a few years back?
Oh, I would have been like, oh yeah, obesity medicine, da da da, and then gone down the rabbit hole of, obesity is not a disease, and the arguments would have started, and then the GLP-1 discussion was starting to happen. I would have yeah. It just, I knew where it would have gone, and in the
Mhm.
past, I would have gone down those rabbit holes, and I'm like,
If you were to sum up like the statement of frustration, the statement that you so much wanted to say to that, or wanted not just to say, but to be heard on by that obesity specialist or by society at large, what would that statement be?
there's so many people being heard. I mean, not being heard, being hurt
Mhm.
by societal ideals and diet culture and all other co-opted words from that.
Mhm.
And if people really understood the magnitude of how many humans
Mhm.
that harms,
Yeah.
that's the point I'd want to get across.
Yeah. So as this obesity specialist, or really anybody is standing in front of you and sharing some of their beliefs about how people should lose weight, what you're wanting to say is, I've seen so many people so deeply hurt by this.
Yep.
Can you share a little bit again, to the extent that I don't know how public you are with yours and your child's journey, but can you share a little bit about what that was like how you've seen this, the hurt caused by fat phobic or weight centric messages around health?
Well, I think it's being on social media and seeing all the messages and what I eat in a day and different bodies and what exercises you should do and just, role models that are all getting smaller and smaller and smaller. I think
Mhm.
that that's just so damaging.
Yeah. Can you describe some of the damage that you've seen it cause or that you felt? Like, what I hear is also that you've struggled with body image yourself, but in
Yeah,
ways that were less noticeable.
yeah, yeah. I just think it's so much harder now because it's in your face 24/7.
Yeah.
Like for us, yeah, I'm gonna completely date myself. Yeah, I get 17 magazine once a month, right? They'd have
Mhm.
little articles in it that I would read. But then you put it down till next month, right?
Yeah.
It's not what life is right now. It's
Hmm.
constant, it's constant, it's constant. I think about the reels, your reels,
Yeah.
all of that. So
Yeah.
it's just inundated.
Yeah. What your child was put through was a lot more painful than what you were.
Oh yeah. Well, I
Hmm.
didn't have an eating disorder, but yes, but even without that, yes.
Yeah. And what was it like for you watching your child going through that?
Oh, horrible.
Hmm.
And it's so much more than body image, but yes, horrible.
Hmm. Can you share more about that horrible, some of the what you were feeling on a day-to-day basis during that time?
Scared,
Hmm.
overwhelmed, scared. Is she ever going to be okay?
Hmm.
How the F did we get here?
Yeah. Terrified. What's going to happen to her? And also trying to make sense of it, trying to understand like what went wrong, what happened.
Which doesn't matter.
Hmm. One of the ways that we try to soften some of the pain, like if I can understand it, maybe it'll go away.
Right. Yeah,
Yeah.
I work with people of like, you didn't cause it, right? So I had to take those.
Hmm.
Those were wasted thoughts.
Yeah. And what have you learned being further along the line now and supporting other parents through that process? What have you seen in the healing process and what that looks like for not just for the individual, the child or the person who's struggling, but for families?
I mean, I hate everything we went through, and I love where it brought, I'm just using my daughter and I into our relationship and into ways that she's able to see society and social pressures through a different light. Doesn't mean it's not hard.
Yeah.
She's able to see them much more.
Mhm. Yeah. Has she landed on the same side as you?
Oh gosh. Oh yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is she outspoken like you too?
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
Do you guys work together at all in your like?
No, I mean behind the scenes we talk about a lot of stuff, but she
Mm.
does her stuff, I do mine. She has a podcast that we just did an episode together.
Oh,
Uh,
sweet.
so that was good. But yeah, we've talked about maybe in the future, who knows? Uh,
Yeah.
she's graduating this year with her degree in psychology. So she
Oh,
does
wow.
get into
Okay.
mental health eating disorders.
Wow. Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And she'd love if I would fund her to open up a practice. I'm just kidding.
Mhm. Totally. Yeah. As we wrap up, what do you, if let's say either a parent or medical professional is listening to this, what do you want to leave them off with? What's the message that you want our listeners to hear?
Well, if you're a medical professional, please do not in your office tell people, especially anyone, to lose weight for their health. Uh,
Hmm.
you have a kid come in who says they want to lose a couple pounds or eating healthy. Please be very mindful of what you're saying.
Hmm.
Because those are messages I see the other side of daily. Um,
Hmm.
and if you think this is a load of garbage, my opinion would be to open your eyes and try to look at things differently.
Hmm. Yeah.
Because it's hard.
Yeah. Awesome. Thanks so much, Laura.
You're welcome.
I will